Yeah. Hi, Ivy. How are you? It's nice to see you. All right. Okay. Trying to go live. So, hi, guys. Yeah, it's nice to see you. Okay. Okay. I'm trying to invite the other therapist. I don't know why it's giving me a hard time. Hi, Faith.
Hi, Joy. How are you doing this morning?
Doing so good. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Okay, so I think we can start. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so Ivy is in the room.
Hi, Ivy. Welcome.
Yeah, and Mama Ntando Mutua. Hi, welcome. Welcome to
Welcome.
BNM Safe Zone, our online safe place. Yeah, and so my name is Joy Eve. I'm a therapist. I'm a virtual therapist with BNM Safe Zone, and we love taking people through therapy. Hey, yeah. So this is actually our first live, and we are going to be talking majorly about grief and loss. We've already had clients who have already been going through grief and loss, and Faith has majorly been the one to handle it because she's majorly a specialist. Hi, Asha. Hi. All right. So, welcome. Please invite your friends. Let them come in every time we are live, so that you can learn a bit about mental health. Yeah. So please prepare your questions if you have any question that you have. And yeah, it's going to be majorly conversational, but will also be educational as well. So please join in and ask as many questions as you want. Okay. Yeah, so I think you can introduce yourself, Faith. Pole kwa kuongea sana.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Hi, my name is
Uh-huh.
Faith. I'm a therapist at BNM and a trained
Uh-huh.
psychologist and a grief counselor. And I'm glad to
Yeah.
be here, part of the safe space.
Yeah. So Faith, I think we had already like spoken with all of the therapists that we were supposed to like talk about something that we are well good at. And one of the things you mentioned is grief and loss, and you wanted us to talk a bit about it. So we're going to have different things that we're going to discuss, and how people can overcome grief, and maybe self-care about grief. Grief could be in very different ways. Kindly tell us a bit about grief and loss.
Okay, so grief actually is loss, and it's the emotions that surround and are
Mm,
associated with dealing with any kind of loss. I know when we talk about loss and grief, most people tend to think it's about losing a loved one, but grief is and loss is so much more, right? And it's all the
mm,
emotions surrounding that. And first of
mm,
all, I would like to go through the types of loss so that
mm,
when they're asking questions, they can know that it's not only when you lose a loved one that you can say you're
mm.
grieving a loss. It is not.
Yeah.
Yes. So there are many kind of losses, and there is loss of physical health, even as you're growing older, or even childhood sicknesses, right? And that's a type of loss. Like the other day, I was talking to one of my clients, and they were like, "It's quite disheartening now that I'm growing old, that I'm losing some of my eyesight." Right? They have to wear glasses, and they're really grieving that loss of being able to see clearly. And then there is pain, chronic pain. Even all of us, we say, "Oh, my back these days." And you wake up, sometimes you're so tired, and you grieve your youthful nature when you used to wake up feeling great, right? And then there's loss of marriages or even friendships. Because I know sometimes losing a friendship feels like you have lost a whole person, and they are alive, but you have lost this person who you used to talk to, who you used to maybe have good moments with. And then there's loss of memories. Like the other day, I was asking myself, do I really remember my childhood? And sometimes that feels bad, right? Do you sometimes find yourself feeling like that, Joy?
Yeah, definitely. I've lost. I think personally for me, because I'm really specialized in narcissistic abuse. So some of the things I have had to grieve is really what could have been. So
Yes.
yeah, I've experienced loss. The good thing is that I'm aware of what I feel about what I've already lost in relationships.
Oh, yes. And actually, that you have brought another kind of loss, and that's loss of the
Yeah,
future, the should,
yeah,
the dreams, and the vision
have
you had of the future. And a good
yeah.
example of this is you're in school and you maybe wanted to be a doctor, right? And then your
Yeah.
grades, once you look at your grades, you're like, no. And sometimes you start a course, and then the pressures of that course, you cannot deal with it. And you're like, no, do I really want to go into this career? And you make the choice of leaving the career.
Yeah.
And that's another whole type of grief, the future you thought you would have had, right? And then
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
loss of independence. And some of
Mm.
this loss is what people call bride guilt. Like when you're getting married, there's this type of anxiety you get, right? Because it's a
Yeah.
type of loss. You're just about to leave the thought you had of independence and freedom and enter into a union. And some people really
Yeah.
grieve that period. And then there's also the
Mm.
loss of social loss. Friends,
Yeah.
even surrounding
Mm.
divorce, you might lose some
Mm.
types of friends, maybe church, around church, or the group of friends you had together, and you're like, where will my friends go, right? Who will they
Yeah.
choose to remain with? And
Yeah.
also the
Yeah.
titles of and
Mm.
roles. Maybe, and
Yeah.
this sometimes can come with the loss, especially when it comes to a child or a miscarriage, whereby you
Yeah.
lose the role that you once thought you will have because you had a future. You had already started planning how feeding will be, how breastfeeding will be, or maybe the future you will have with this child, the schools you're going to take the children. And that is a grief. And this is what I call secondary grief that even surrounds primary grief. So we only
Yeah.
most of the time, we only look at grief only as the primary loss. What have I
Yeah.
lost now? But
Mm.
how about the secondary losses that come with a grief? So
Yeah.
let's take an example of a divorce or a separation. Then there is
Mm.
even the loss of financial security, the loss
Yeah.
of a
Yeah.
home, the home you both
Mm.
had. Then there is the friends. Then there is the role of being a wife. And then
Yeah.
there's a lot of secondary losses that accompany a
Yeah.
primary loss. And it's always good to identify the secondary
Mm.
losses because you might grieve the primary loss and then never
Yeah.
get to grieve secondary losses. And then there's loss of a life. And this can be
Yeah.
when you lose a job, change jobs,
Mm.
and maybe
Yeah.
you're in Nairobi and you have to go to a rural setup, and you have lost a
Mm.
lifestyle. You had
Yeah.
takeaway, just close to you, and now you have to literally go the extra mile to get a takeaway. Your children have changed schools, you are away from your friends, and that can enter you into a stage of grief. And sometimes we lessen the impact of our grief. An example would be, okay, I have not lost someone, but you have lost a lifestyle, and it can be for financial reasons. Yes, especially during Corona, most people lost a lifestyle because there were pay cuts, and you had to refigure. Maybe some people moved back home. Some people maybe moved from a 3-bedroom to a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom. Some people had to cut takeaway.
In
Yes.
2020, so many people have lost so many things. And whoever, if you have joined, please mention some of the things you feel you have lost, and if you have felt any form of loss, and so that we can see, so that you can also engage and also ask some questions that you have concerning loss. Yeah.
True. Yes. And also there is loss of self-concept. Loss of self-concept happens to us on maybe a daily basis, if not on a regular basis. Because a self-concept can be, maybe you had this thought about honesty, about integrity, and maybe you have done something that has gone against the values you once held. And that can be a type of grief whereby you say, I didn't think I was this type of, right? And you grieve. Yes. And then another one, a great example would be, yes,
So,
loss of oneself.
Mama, we've seen, speak about loss of oneself after giving birth. Yeah, definitely.
True. Loss of oneself after giving birth is true because before giving birth, there is this self-concept you had of yourself. And then now you have a new role. And especially I'm going to talk about how society now has expectations of you losing part of your identity and taking only the identity of being a mother. And then there is the expectation of what comes with the new role. Yes, I would like to hear more about her experience, about after giving birth, right? How was the birth? Was there social support around after giving birth? Were there expectations that you felt you would not be able to live out to? Because sometimes we lose ourselves when we start letting the influencing of the society come into us. How are you supposed to raise this child, right? And now you're supposed to only be in service of this child. And it can feel selfish when you say, I need time for myself, but also physical. There is something that I learned recently, and it made real sense, that physical separation from your child, taking time physically away from your child, is good for your mental health. And not for an hour, even a day. But sometimes, especially after giving birth, you may feel guilty about leaving. So I would like to know about her experience, about her socials, about are you sleeping enough? Because also if you're not sleeping enough, then you tend to feel more disenfranchised with yourself. Are you connecting with your friends? Do you have someone you can talk to about the struggles of giving birth? So it is a type of loss. And also, as I was saying, the self-concept of now you have to, what things have changed, because that is the part of acceptance. How have things changed and how have things remained the same? Because some things have changed, but some things about you have remained the same. So I would tell her, reconnect with the things that have remained the same, the things that make you still feel like you.
Yeah. So she says, I sleep too much. I can sleep even for 2 days. Yeah, definitely. It's like maybe there's a lot of feeling tired, I think, because of being overwhelmed and the responsibility that comes with it. Yeah, so I think maybe we can talk a bit about that, about how to adjust, especially when you have already gotten more responsibility and things have changed now. You no longer have the less responsibility that you had before, and how to adjust better now, especially now that she has more responsibility. Yeah.
Yes. So with more responsibilities, there is more delegation, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
and I was talking about the guilt of society whereby you may feel that you need to do everything by
Mm,
yourself and doing it for you. And this is where
mm,
I would ask her questions about what does motherhood look like for you?
yeah. Yeah.
What are the thoughts and the feelings you have toward motherhood?
Mm,
If you find yourself
mm,
sleeping too much, it can be one, you may sleep too much because you're tired, as Joy Eve said, or because
yeah.
you do not have the energy. You might not be you're tired, but also do you have the energy after taking care of your newborn? Or I would like to know the age group of the child.
Yeah, so I like the fact that you have mentioned that more responsibility comes with more delegation. I think what happens with the society is that we feel like we have to do everything on our own, and that sometimes there's that stigma. I don't know where that stigma honestly comes from, where you feel like you cannot do things on your own, and that oh, what am I saying? Like you cannot do things without asking people for help, and you have to always do things on your own. So sometimes you get so overwhelmed, and I think piling up so much responsibility brings a lot of bitterness and feeling like you are alone. And most of people who actually carry too much responsibility end up being very depressed compared to people who allow themselves to actually receive the support they actually need. Yeah.
I
So she
agree.
says that, yeah, sorry. Continue,
Yes.
please.
Asking for help. Yes. 0 to 10 months is the child is in
Mm,
the very formative age, yes. But then it
mm,
is okay to ask for help. And also it is
mm,
okay to seek someone. So because sleeping for up to two days is too much. You may ask for help, yes, and also find out why you're feeling tired, because it may be the baby, it can be the responsibility tied to that, or it can be the situation surrounding the birth and the support you got after you gave
mm,
birth. So it is a lot
mm,
of factors, and it's not one thing that causes something.
mm,
You cannot pinpoint
mm,
it's this one thing. It's just one thing that piles on another thing that piles on another thing and leaves you feeling drained. So ask for
yeah,
help,
definitely.
delegate more.
Mm,
If you do not have
mm,
a social support around you,
mm,
create a social support. And this is the importance
mm,
of support groups. So find women who are raising children around those age. Sometimes knowing that
mm,
you're not the only one going through this, because also at that time when you have a young child, it can be isolating. And this is why
yeah.
sometimes the feelings of I am going through this alone, no one else can
Mm,
understand me, and also you are
yeah.
with the child indoors for a
Mm,
longer period of time. And when you get
yeah.
isolated and you cannot share, you cannot talk, women are
Mm,
conversational. And when you spend a
yeah.
whole day the next day with a child, you might feel
Mm,
you're getting agitated and you do not have
yeah.
someone to talk to. So find a support group for women, or a woman who has a
Mm,
child around the years your child is, and just have a conversation, talk about your struggles, and it may help. And also seek
mm,
support. It is okay
mm,
not to be okay.
yeah. Yeah, yes. So Maida says yes, the presented issue is not exactly the issue she might be going through. Going through things, and now it's triggered when the baby came. Yeah. There could be other things that she might have been going through, and maybe, yeah, just can you talk a bit about that, and especially dealing with maybe former baggage that that could actually even trigger more emotions when you go through a loss of a particular, let's say, for now, I think we are talking about the loss of a sequence, the loss of a particular way of doing things. And yeah, so could there be now, like, talk about that baggage that could actually cause more trigger, especially when more responsibility have come in?
Yes, because one of the thing that can cause a lot of triggers, and this is why when we are talking about loss, we talk about this the what else happened around the time you had this loss. Because as I had said earlier, a primary loss has other secondary losses, and sometimes we recognize a secondary loss but never the primary loss, or sometimes we deal with the primary loss and we don't deal with the secondary loss. So when you're talking about what other things we're going through, how was the pregnancy, what was the situation surrounding the pregnancy, how is your financial situation, are you being supported? Did you feel supported? How was the birth? Because a traumatic birth experience can lead to traumatic issues when you're taking care of the child. So what other issues are surrounding the birth, and also before, right? And also what are the beliefs you have surrounding motherhood? That is one of the question I find very important to ask, because as you said, why do we struggle asking for help? It can be the beliefs we have toward motherhood, that motherhood is, and there's a word that I sacrificial love, and sometimes we see that sacrificial love is true love, that you sacrifice who you for the people you love. And it is the type of love that we were socialized into. How did the women around you experience motherhood? How were you mothered? Right? So there is a lot, and it's very specific to a person, right? How emotionally have you dealt with traumas? Have you dealt with the traumas in your past? Maybe it's trauma of relationships, of how are you attached in relationships? How are you struggling to attach with your child? Right? There is so much we can talk about, but when it has to be to a specific person, not general, because I wouldn't want to generalize her reasons. It's very personal. Grief is experienced personally. There is no right way to grieve, and there is no wrong way to grieve.
I'd like to ask maybe the audience. Most of the times we don't affirm people that sometimes grief can be very messy, and there's no specific way. You can't, as much as we use techniques to actually deal with grief, there's no specific way that it can go. It cannot be all regular, like all straightforward. Sometimes grief can be so messy, especially loss of maybe a relationship, loss of a partner, loss of a family member. It can be so messy. So I don't know if someone has experienced a messy grief, and I don't know if maybe Faith, you can affirm something about the messiness of the pain in grief.
Yes. So grief, as you said sometimes, but grief is messy. Sometimes you may feel the first year of grief, actually, when we are saying normal grief, and I don't like the word normal because sometimes it does not, as you said, validate the messiness of grief. But the time period of grief, as per research, should be with 1 year. So during that 1 year, messy is grief, with all the emotions, all the thoughts, the frustration, the anger, the hopelessness, helplessness can be overwhelming. And then after the 1 year, you're expected to already have healed and moved on. Forgetting that there are triggers to grief, that you can make 5 steps forward and 10 back. When, especially something I have loved working with clients is identifying triggers, more
Yeah.
preventative than anything else. Can you create a timeline of when the things that trigger you? And then, because grief can be you, 1 year later, you feel you have dealt with the grief. And then an anniversary, a birthday, a place you used to visit, a particular scent, a particular
Yeah.
occasion triggers you back, and all the feelings of anger, all the feelings of hopelessness come
Yeah.
flooding in, and sometimes you may feel, I thought I did the work.
Oh,
I
I
thought I
thought.
put in the work to heal, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And it can be frustrating. But something I would like to tell you is that loss is loss. It
Hmm.
happened, and the wounds that it leaves never,
Hmm.
you can learn to deal with it, learn to live life. And this is why I ask the question, how have things changed and how have they remained the same? Because things
Hmm.
change, but things remain the same. And there are feelings also of guilt and
Hmm.
survivor, guilt and also pain that surrounds it, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
feelings around birthdays, anniversaries, scents, you might find you have healed, and then you hear something, a song the person particularly liked, or you meet a colleague if you lost a job, and all the feelings
Hmm.
of betrayal, especially if the job, you lost the job in a way that you felt was unfair, and then all the feelings of anger resurface, and that is okay. It is
Yeah.
okay.
There is
There's no
completely
sure
okay.
way to grieve. And there's no
Yeah.
textbook where I will tell you, you have to follow the 5 stages of grief in any particular
Hmm.
order. No. A lot of factors influence how you grieve and how well
Hmm.
you adapt, but you never fully forget. And Joy,
Definitely.
when I said that, there's also the grief that comes with losing memory of of the grief. When you start
Yeah.
feeling
Yeah.
the pain, you feel
Hmm.
guilty that you have started losing the feeling of grieving.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 Especially when I have had a client mention to me, especially when we were handling their loss of their dad, and I think it had stayed for a long time. They had lost their dad like when they were like 12, and up to date they had not necessarily overcome the death. And they would come and tell me, I feel bad that I might be forgetting how he looks. I might be forgetting how he talks. I might actually forgetting some of the things that we have already experienced together. And,
Yes,
there's a lot of guilt around that. And I think one of the most important thing, how I normally handle people is really deal with the heart. And
yes,
sometimes we do a lot of role. I think there's that role exchanged. The role technique where now you act as the deceased, and you mention to them, or first explain to them how a person cannot live life without being loved, and the fact that you ended up loving this person. They are so grateful. There's nothing as beautiful as being able to love someone and live life being loved. And I think if you can be loved and be accepted regardless of your mistakes, of your however of your negativity, and someone just loves you and embraces you, that's the best thing. And you can honestly rest knowing that someone loves you. And it is not bad to grieve someone. It actually shows that you actually loved them. And then you switch to that role and you start affirming them and start telling them, you know what, I I'm so grateful that I ended up being loved by you, because honestly, if I came on earth and never had someone to love me, I would have never been able to live to my fullest. But your love has given me the chance to love. And sometimes you actually use the same thing when it comes to stuff. For example, let's say you've lost a sense of purpose. Some people lose a sense of purpose because maybe they've been cheated on, maybe they've lost trust. And sometimes we do the same thing and we acknowledge the fact that, purpose, you've lost purpose. And then now purpose tells you, you took me and you built me. And I'm grateful that you are able to build me to what it is now. That love that you had for me and you built me, now me, I'm satisfied. I am now rested. Now you can transfer it, and I know it's going to be awesome for this other purpose you're about to start. And it's the same thing when it moving from one person's love to another. It's just affirming them that it's okay. Me, you loved me, and I'm satisfied, and your love alone is satisfactory. I don't know how you normally handle that, Faith. How do you handle someone to actually move on from loss to now living life normally?
True. I like how you handled that, because it is good to understand the meaning of that thing you lost. And one of the things I have to write is what meaning, the meaning this person thing, because also innocence. When you said that, I remembered the loss of innocence from childhood to adulthood. And for most people, it hits just before you go to university or college, because you now start realizing, or when something happens, there is innocence that we were not supposed to lose, or that is not the time you're supposed to lose that innocence. And I would like to talk also of rape. Rape is a loss of innocence and also worldview, because inherently when you are a child, you view life with these big eyes of a child, where you think that everyone is inherently nice and good. And I don't think that anyone is bad. It's just that people do hurtful things. And when you look also at cheating, it is that loss of worldview, whereby you had this thought of a person and now they have changed into this. And sometimes I like people to write an autobiography of the life they had with someone, of the life they had with a person, a pet, a job, just writing about your life with this person or thing or value or worldview that you had, and then have them also. And then after that chapter has ended, so the first one is writing that autobiography of what the life you had with this thing, the feelings, the thoughts, the emotions that you had with this person. Then after that, just like the way I like using the analogy of a book has chapters. And when you have a trilogy of books, for the people who love books that have book 1, book 2, book 3, once the book has ended and a chapter has ended, there is a full stop. And then begins the next of the story. The same way in movies, in a whole series, you have characters dying, characters getting married, but then you have season 2, because sometimes it is hard to realize what next, what happens next. So you have lost this. What is the next chapter? And you can start the next chapter without closing this chapter. And you close the thing. Yes. And then writing an open letter when you said about the feelings, because you have the dreams, the aspirations that you had, and also the life that you think you should have had. If it is with a parent, there are things you wanted them to experience. Like if they've passed on before you had your own child, or before your child's marriage, there are things, write it in that open letter. And then sometimes grief is hard. If you had a toxic relationship with whatever you have lost.
Yeah. I think it can be, I think sometimes people don't, I think some of the things that I have sometimes to talk about in sessions is really the differentiation between a healthy and an unhealthy relationship, or healthy or unhealthy environment. And that's where you've mentioned toxicity. So can you kindly maybe elaborate a bit about how do you know that you are actually in a toxic environment, and that you are actually grieving something that you're not supposed to even be grieving about,
Yeah. So when you say unhealthy relationships and healthy relationship, there is a grief that comes with grieving your thought of having a healthy relationship. When a relationship is toxic, You still grieve what you had. If it started out as a healthy relationship, and then you are in a now toxic relationship, it can be physical abuse, it can be emotional abuse, it can be sexual abuse, it can be financial abuse, it can be psychological abuse. One, how does this person make you feel about yourself? Not even about the relationship itself, because especially in marriages, and this is found with clients, is the most difficult thing to grieve, where when you have a good father but a toxic husband, so you cannot separate him being a husband and him being a father. He's a wonderful father, but he's a toxic husband, right? And the grief is, you wish he was as gentle as he is with your children. And sometimes there's guilt that comes with that, because you're like, he is toxic to me, but good to my children. Am I ready to rob their children out of their father, their good father? But then it's also separating you as a person and you in the role of being a wife, a girlfriend, a partner. So once, if you are a girlfriend, but as a person, they toxic to you, they are demeaning emotionally, they maybe starve you of love, starve you of physical, starve you of things you want. So one of the things you have to say is, what do you want? Then what are you getting? So are you having unrealistic expectations, or are your expectations reality? Because sometimes there is that disconnect of, is it that I am expecting too much, or is it that I'm not being given what I want? So finding the disconnect. Is it a disconnect, or are you validating? Validating, yes, I want this, but it's not being given to me. So there's also grieving the loss of the relationship you thought you should have had. So you wanted a healthy, loving partnership, but that is not what you're getting. And once you grieve what you thought you should have had, can you live with what you have if it is not abuse? But then abuse is a whole new game of toxicity.
I think what happens is that one of the things I really have sometimes to handle is making people conscious of the trauma bond. Most of the times when you're grieving something, especially a relationship or a bond you've been having with a toxic person, is really a trauma. And sometimes it's good, even as a therapist, when you're taking someone through, remind them how it felt. Because sometimes you may find, oh, I feel lonely, I wish they were here. But then remind them, remember, how did it make you feel every time you guys were together? And maybe they would remember, oh, he was so abusive. And now, we try and compare that. What about now? How do you feel now that
So
you are now peaceful and everything? How do you feel now? And you say, I'm more peaceful, I can eat, I can achieve my goals. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes you have to remember how it made you feel being in that environment, so that now you can be able to know, now I'm in a good place. Now, and constantly going there, it's like relieving your trauma, helps you be able to move on and actually form now meaningful relationship. And actually people who have already gone through unhealthy relationships are able to actually form more healthier relationship, because now they know what it means to actually have something nasty, something not so nice, something horrible. Then
true. And yes, when you said that, I remember there's something I would like to add on to that. That is why journaling as a method of healing is very important. Journaling helps you remember what exactly you felt, because over time, and also there's something I would like to really emphasize on, you do not have to remember the exact feelings, relive the exact feelings to remember how it felt. Because also you can re-traumatize yourself if you keep holding on to those feelings in order to remember the lessons. So you do not have to hold on to the pain of loss to remember the one you're grieving. because that's where the
Yeah.
guilt comes from. The minute you can breathe, because sometimes guilt makes you feel like you need to be in that moment where you cannot breathe, where you are anxious, whereby you are hopeless, in order to remember the person, all the lessons and memories that this person had. You do not need to hold on to that. But what you can do is, during that moment, you can journal. And when you feel you're losing that clarity, you can go back to the journal, because that was your raw emotions. And then after the journal, you can close it and say, this marks the end of my chapter. And being relational and the craving meaning does not have to be attached to a person. And this is why we may lose our identity when we place our identity or with other people. And that is where trauma bonding comes in. You two have gone through the same situations, so you feel hard and felt with this person, but it's trauma. So find relation with yourself, find relation with friendships. And research has shown friendships and meaningful friendships actually, and with other people, actually gives the same feeling of fulfillment as being in a relationship. So you may not necessarily need the relationship at that point, but form good friendships with other people, and especially with yourself.
Yeah, so the people who are already watching, so I think there are specific stages. If you've already gone through loss, I hope you have already understood that loss doesn't necessarily mean that you've lost someone. It could mean that you have lost a particular previous life, something that you felt like was comfortable, but you actually lost. So there are different stages of losses. There's the first stage where you feel shocked. There's the second stage where you feel is fear. There's also, after you start fearing, you start denying that maybe this thing could have happened. How could it have happened? And then there's that place of bargaining. You're trying to bargain. And there's now, at that place, you either come into depression, where your emotions are too much and you can't necessarily understand why, it's like you've reached to your end. But from there, from depression, that's where now you decide whether you'll either heal or you'll go downhill. So I don't know, the people who are watching, where do you feel you are in a particular place that you are? Are you at a place of shock? Are you shocked? Oh my gosh, I've lost this. Or are you at a place of denial? It can't be. Are you at a place of maybe guilt? You're feeling, that's where now you're trying to bargain. I wish, oh God, please, if you just give it back to me, maybe I will change. Where do you feel like you are? So you can write down in your comments. So I can see here, Asha, you said that you love this. It's so relatable. Kindly tell us your experience. What makes this, like relatable with you? And Martha, you've mentioned that maybe about Mama Antondo. Yeah. You mentioned that maybe she perceived motherhood was going to be not how it is now. Yeah, there's that loss of expectation as well. Yeah, the frustrations, I totally agree with you, Faith. When you say you won't generalize, you are different. Yeah, definitely. There's that aspect of loss, even because you expected the motherhood somehow would be somehow easy, but then you realize kwa ground ni different. And then you have to somehow start learning some things. And we're going to have a video where we are going to also talk about postmortem depression and also some of the things mothers go through and the loss. There's so much loss that go through. There's also, you didn't expect even the pain of giving birth could actually be so painful as that point. So we are going to talk about all this. So now I think we can go to talking about self-care for grief. So, Faith, talk a bit about that.
Yes. So after all of this, because grief is actually, self-care for grief is a continuous process. It never ends. So once you have had grief, and one of the things before we go to self-care of grief, I would like to talk about a little bit about the factors that the factors that actually influence how you grieve, because that will influence also how you self-care for grief, right? One of it is your closeness, physical and emotional proximity to the being you have lost. You are so physically close to him or emotionally proximity, it will affect how you grieve. And this is why I do not like when people say you're grieving like it is you who has umefiwa, because it was a friend, but maybe this friend, you were with them every single day, right? Or you're grieving for a phone, right? You're grieving for a phone, and people are saying sini simu tu, right? It's only a phone, but this phone represented maybe you are working online, or they had memories of someone you lost. They had a voice note of someone telling you they were proud of you, and maybe they are no longer around. You see, so there is so much attached to this. And then there is, what other stressors? I remember when I asked, what other stressors have you experienced during that time? Because if you lost a house, then lost maybe through then lost your job, then you lost your phone, then all of a sudden you've lost a relationship. You see how at the end of the grief, your grief will be everything coming together at one point, right? And you will grieve. Intensity of the grief will be overwhelming. Then also there is social support. What is the social support you during this time? And one of the grief the grief that is not socially sanctioned, because I have had a person talking to me about grief, of someone they were having an affair with, but because it is not socially sanctioned and that relationship has ended, they cannot talk about that relationship, because society will be like, yeah, they were not even yours. How are you grieving that loss? But it is loss. Because it is not socially sanctioned, you cannot speak about it in public, then you feel that hey, I'm not supposed to, it may affect how you grieve. Another thing may be, how much control or responsibility do you feel you had towards the loss? Control, actually, when you said about the state of grief, anger is one way that tries to inform how we control. When everything is feeling hopeless, and when everything is feeling out of your control, at least you can control the anger towards the situation. So if you felt, one of it is, if maybe you lost someone and maybe it was a long illness, and you're like, maybe you would not have taken them to that hospital. And then there's feelings of guilt, maybe of shame. I should not have told them that this, right? Maybe that is why they have ended the relationship. Or maybe I told them I like this, and they felt they couldn't deal with it, and that is why they have left me. So how much control or responsibility do you feel towards the loss? Maybe it is a phone, and you are walking with it in town, and you had it on your hand, and you're like, maybe I should have put it in my bag. So how that control influence how you grieve. So maybe you may be stuck in a stage of grief because of the responsibility you feel towards the loss. Then, talking about that, now I can talk about the self-care. One of it is sleep, eating. So sleep and eating may be affected during the first maybe months or year of the grief, and that is normal. Normalize your experiences, but then you can keep track of your sleep schedule and your eating schedule, because when it persists, then you can seek help. So sleep enough. I feel when there is loss, and this is why your body tends to feel tired all the time, because sleep helps you recuperate faster. So also eat, do not neglect eating. Sometimes it feels you have no appetite, you cannot stand food, and there's the guilt, if I'm the one who is here, I'm not going to do anything. So eat, right? And then try to eat a balanced diet, because at the end of the time, sometimes, especially with the loss of relationship, mostly women binge eat during the first few months. And then you may gain weight, and this will also be another type of loss, because loss of physical, because you feel you've gained weight, you have lost a relationship, you may feel more hopeless and depressed. Then also seek social support. And social support is very important during the first 4 hours of loss, especially when it comes to losing a loved one. Who is your support system during that first 4 hours? Call up your best friend, someone you know will let you grieve, will let you cry. Then also the first 24 hours and the first week and months after a loss. It can look like bringing this person food. It can look like delegate your work. You don't have to wash dishes. You don't have to wash your clothes. You don't even have to go for occasions. You can delegate everything. Then another thing is think about what is next. Because sometimes you may mask grief because of what is next. Because you have to figure out your finances, you have to figure out maybe childcare, you have to figure out applying for jobs, you have to figure out maybe if it was an engagement, how you're going to tell people. So figure out what is next and rely on your strength. If you cannot figure out what is next, think about, what am I going to do tomorrow? And if tomorrow is too hard, think about, what am I going to do the next hour? Live in the moment. Sometimes the anxiety, sometimes the anxiety of the future will affect how you grieve, because you start thinking about 5 years from now, you start thinking about next week, and it's too hard. So just take the time to think about the next step. What is next for the next hour, one day? So if it's eating, you can think about, what am I having for breakfast now? Don't think of supper. So think about now. Then maybe if it's a job, you can think about, if I've lost a job and I have some savings, what can I do now to control my finances? So take steps now. Don't think about 1 week, don't think about 1 month, because the feelings of anxiety will make the feelings of grief worse, right? Ask for help. Yes, Joiva, you have brought it very well, that we sometimes do not feel the need to ask for help, or we feel guilty asking for help. Ask for help. People are ready to help. It's just that in our mind, we've been told that asking for help is admitting defeat. And sometimes admitting defeat is saying you're not in control of the situation, but it is control to ask for help. If it's the best you can do at that time, ask for help. Also ask for support. Maybe it's taking your child to school. Maybe it is just getting the laundry done. Maybe it's getting dinner done. Ask for help. And the other thing is, do not let anyone tell you how you're supposed to feel. And also, do not let yourself tell yourself also how you should feel, because we are like, it's just a relationship, I shouldn't feel this bad. Do not let yourself feel bad, and also do not let someone else make you feel bad about the way you're grieving, because that is how it makes it worse. Like, it has been 3 years and you're still grieving. Why? Be gentle to yourself. Yes? And also normal reactions. There are people who do not cry after loss. They cry 3 months into the loss. Maybe that time, control for you meant not crying. It meant figuring out what you're going to do. And that is okay. Normalize your reactions to grief. And then also, after you normalize your reaction, also find out, are you reacting from trauma? Are your reactions from trauma, or are they your defense mechanism? And then the last one I'm going to talk about is, the last two. One is coping skills. Your coping skills before grief are going to inform your grief. And then the coping skills you now take up after grief is going to inform how you're going to deal with any other grief that is going to come after. So if you have poor coping skills before, then grief is going to take toll on you. So also try and work on your coping skills. That is, what is your first reaction after loss or disappointment? Because disappointment is just a glimpse into grief, right? Yes.
Yeah,
How
definitely.
you react during disappointment, try and work on your coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
And then the last one, which is very important, is support groups. Support
Yeah.
groups are good because once you're grieving, you feel that nobody understands you, that you feel isolated in your grief, and that can lead into depression and also affect how you ask for help. So
Yeah.
support groups are people who have experienced the thing you have experienced. It might be loss of a child, it can be diabetes support group, because also loss of health is a loss. It can be maybe networking groups of people who are searching for jobs. So
Yeah.
find a support group. It can be new mothers, it can be toddler mothers. And I found these support groups really work because now there you feel people talking about the feelings you already have. You find them even coming up with coping mechanisms that if you have not gone through that situation, you would never know. And you start feeling
Definitely.
less isolated in your grief. You start normalizing the feelings that you're feeling, because if 2, 3 people talk about it, then you're like, oh, so we are all going through this situation. So yes,
Yeah.
those are the very simple steps of self-care after grief.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you may be somewhere and feeling, I don't feel like I can do this on my own. And I feel maybe I do need support. And it's very important for you to actually seek the support you actually need. Get people to support you. People are more than willing. And I think that's why we do have B&M Safe Zone. And our work is to give you that safe place, that safe place, yeah, where you can be able to trust, you can be able to calm down, to find your attachments, find yourself, and come out from that dark hole you might be going through, the loss of anything and everything, and come to understand yourself more. So, just allow yourself to be supported, allow yourself to be helped, allow yourself to be, to be carried and to be helped. Yeah. So, yeah, I think we can reach there. What do you think, Faith?
Yes, I can, unless there is any question before we close. So if there is
Yeah,
no question,
so
then we can end there.
yeah. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining. We'll be having this as frequent as possible, and please share as much as you can to so many people who might need this support. To learn something about any topic. Also, DM us and tell us some of the topics you think we should talk about. We are a team of psychologists, and we can definitely have different topics we can talk about. So please DM us and tell us can you guys just talk about this? Or maybe Faith can maybe talk about this because maybe I liked the way she spoke about a specific topic, so that now we can now empower you on mental health, and you can grow and become all you are meant to be. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Faith. It
Thank
was
you for
nice
you.
having you. Yeah, Aisha, thank you for joining. Thank you for being consistently here. This Tracy, you just joined in. Thank you so much, and for the guys who joined in. All right, so I think we can finish. Let me just yeah.
Okay.
All right. All right. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Have a lively day, everyone.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye.
Okay.